If you want to know the definition of a video game that is a cult classic, I would point to Jagged Alliance 2. Released in 1999, this turn-based tactical game still has a community that constantly updates and mods the game, with the most famous one being 1.13. If I ever tackle Jagged Alliance 2, just know it's going to be a long one with everything that'll need to be covered. Fast forward 24 years later and we finally get an official sequel with Jagged Alliance 3. Funny enough, there have been 9 additional games and expansions released between 2 and 3, but many of them have ultimately disappointed and couldn't inspire players to move on from the beloved classic. Still, is the anticipated third official title worth playing? Or is it best to stick with Jagged Alliance 2? When you start the game, you have 3 difficulties to choose from. Along with that, there's quite a bit of rules and options to enable and disable. I always appreciate when developers go the extra mile to include options like these, and this is no exception here. And after a brief cutscene explaining the plot and what your overall goal is, it is time to hire your first mercenaries through the Association of International Mercenaries, also known as AIM. From here, it's up to you to grab your motley crew of mercenaries and head out to Grand Chien. Unfortunately, the selection here is a bit lacking compared to the previous game. While there are 40 AIM mercs to choose from, and that's the same amount from Jagged Alliance 2, there are quite a bit of mercs missing that aren't given an explanation as to why. Some notable exclusions include my man Lynx and the female Psycho Buzz Garneau. Both were incredibly powerful marksmen that I wish would have made the cut. Heck, I would have even liked to have seen Trevor Colby for an elite explosive expert. Still, there are more than enough mercs to create a solid team with, and are all memorable in their own unique way. There are also mercs that you can recruit out on the field similar to Jagged Alliance 2, although there are only a handful of recruitable characters this time around. For my initial team, I went with Steroid, Buns, Wolf, and Barry. I wanted to initially grab MD to have a medical expert, but he doesn't like Steroid and tried to increase his rates as a result. Along with the AIM mercs, you can also create your own by visiting the Institute of Mercenary Profiling, or IMP for short. This game is full of acronyms, so just get used to it. If you enter the promo code given to you, you can create your own merc manually or take the test to have the game determine the kind of merc you are. I always enjoyed doing this in the prior game and was glad to see this make a return. The biggest benefit outside of crafting the merc the way you want to is that you'll only need to pay a one-time fee and won't need to worry about a contract expiring. And now that the gang has arrived to Grand Chien, it's time to play the game properly. In between battles, you'll navigate each sector in real time, and we'll switch to turn-based combat once combat begins. Since we are armed with 3 pistols and a shotgun, it's best to find better guns as soon as possible. We will also need to rely on stealth and get close to the enemy due to the lack of range we have. And as for the combat itself, it's old school turn-based glory at its finest. I'm honestly pretty glad that Jagged Alliance 3 stuck to its roots and retained the AP system of the prior games. None of this one movement and action BS that has become way too common in today's turn-based games. Depending on the mercenary and their equipment will determine how much AP they have to spend per turn and how much it'll cost for them to move around. Various traits and perks will also influence this, so it's good to know the kind of mercenary you're recruiting. Mercs with light equipment and high agility will be able to move a good distance without spending any AP at all. It's little details like this that make each merc unique even if they may not have the best shooting skill. When attacking an enemy, you can select the body part you want to aim for. Shooting anything other than the torso will reduce accuracy, but may lower the ability of the enemy, such as shooting them in the legs to slow them down, or in the arms to reduce accuracy. Unlike other turn-based games, the chance to hit percentage is hidden from you, and instead you'll need to rely on the dialogue of your mercenaries as they tell you if they have a good shot or if they'll most likely miss. To help with this, you can also invest additional AP points to get a more accurate shot. I usually dump as many points as possible into each shot to guarantee a successful hit unless I am using a machine gun. As much as I do like how much respect the game gives to Jagged Alliance 2, introducing a hit percent chance would have helped to get new players acclimated to the combat. Thankfully, there is a mod out there for this, but more on the game's mod support later. And I gotta say, this game can be brutal, especially early on when your equipment is lacking compared to the threats you'll face. This game is pretty open in terms of where you want to explore next and what direction you want to travel in, and this level of freedom can get you into some early trouble. Through my own dumb fault of not properly scouting areas and preparing myself, I ended up in some pretty bad situations that I needed to really dig deep and find a way out of them. There's technically always the option to retreat, but this can cause a morale loss. Too many morale losses can lead to less AP to use during battle, and the merc no longer wanting to continue working for you when renewing the contract. If you want to give yourself an edge in combat, you can mod any gun that you have as long as you have the correct number of parts and components. It's also recommended to have someone in the group with a high mechanical skill to make sure the attachment is crafted properly. Thankfully, Steroid fits the role perfectly with his high mechanical skill and was able to throw on a scope and a silencer to a dingy rifle that I found. And there's quite a bit of weapons and styles to try out for yourself. You have a pretty good variety of weapons ranging from pistols to rocket launchers. If you have an ambidextrous character, it is recommended for them to wield dual pistols or MAC-10s and go crazy. Due to Barry's high explosive skill and perk that has him automatically craft shaped charges, his role was to chuck as many grenades at the enemy as possible. This was great for crowd control and limiting the numerical advantage of the enemy. Also had another merc in blood that I recruited later to focus primarily on throwing knives and taking out the enemy up close. I also really want to give out a shout out to these destructible environments. They are a ton of fun and can lead to new opportunities for the player. By throwing a grenade in front of an enemy's cover, you can then send in your shotgun unit to finish the enemy off. Or heck, you can follow up the grenade toss with a barrage of machine gun bullets from the same person. It's also just so over the top on how one well-placed sniper bullet can somehow take down an entire wall with ease. Fun fact, Jagged Alliance 3 was originally going to be on the Silent Storm engine before that project was ultimately scrapped. I feel like that engine's level of destruction is carried on here, so honestly any game that can pay homage to Silent Storm in a fun way like this is always a game worth playing, most of the time. While I do like the variety of weapons on display here, the balancing could have used a bit more work. Similar to Jagged Alliance 2, range is king as snipers with high marksmanship can take out many enemies with a well-placed headshot with ease. Still, I found many styles to be very good with the right combination of talents, traits, perks, and upgrades to your weapon. New to Jagged Alliance 3 are the perks that you are able to pick once you level up. In prior games, leveling up was seen as more of a general boost to a mercenary stats, as well as the dreaded increase in salary demands. From here, you can pick a perk depending on the amount of points in a given mercenary stats. For example, a character like Steroid is able to pick strength perks due to him having over 90 strength. It's a great way to further personalize each of your mercenaries for their specific role. And you'll quickly find out that your mercs are not just numbers and variables. Each comes with their own voice and personality that may influence what you can and can't do. Certain characters can also unlock unique dialogue options that offer more flavor for the world and can even open up new paths. Some characters will also flat out refuse to join your operation if you have a certain member in your party. In my playthrough, I hired Hitman on my team. When I tried to hire Raider on my team, he declined my offer of employment since he wanted nothing to do with him. I'm guessing Raider didn't take too kindly to Hitman flirting with his wife Raven in Aruco. Since we have so many returning mercs, I was curious how they would be handled from a voice acting perspective. To my delight, many of them do a great job in keeping with the spirit of the characters and what they initially brought to the table. Some characters seem to have a change in personality, but others are just like you remembered, like the prudish Buns or the Schwarzenegger-inspired Steroid. The rest of the voices are also very good, although the Legion members sound like they were all voiced by the same French person. Honestly, most of the audio department is very solid. Guns sound incredibly satisfying when being used, especially shotguns and light machine guns. The music was also a very welcome surprise as I was shocked at how good it turned out. The best way I can describe it is that it reminds me of old school Tom Clancy Rainbow Six titles, along with a hint of Ghost Recon. If you've played these games, you'll know exactly what to expect. And since I mentioned voices, we might as well talk about how dialogue is handled here. Compared to Jagged Alliance 2, talking to NPCs has seen a much appreciated update. You're given several choices on what you want to say within a given situation. Some choices you make will have dire consequences, so it's best to know how your mercs will react in a given situation or how the citizens may view you going forward. Sometimes to have peace, you gotta make a deal with the devil. What really separates the Jagged Alliance series from other turn-based strategy games is the fact that this is a serious operation here. You'll need to secure mines in order to have a steady flow of income, or you'll run out of money fast when it's time to renew contracts. You'll also want to protect the mines and towns you take over by training militia. This can be done by right-clicking the territory your squad is currently occupying and selecting operations and assigning the appropriate mercs. Many other operations can be done here, including repairing weapons, healing wounds, and scouting other sectors for intel. There's quite a bit that makes Jagged Alliance 3 feel like a fully fledged dynamic campaign rather than just a series of combat encounters. There's the main quest of rescuing the president of Grand Chien and defeating the leader of the Legion forces known as the Mayor. However, there are a boatload of side quests that'll help you increase loyalty of the local populace, as well as get you accustomed to the culture located here. Many of these are usually worth pursuing as they can lead to rewards such as unique guns, money, and even some new mercs to add to your squad. I will say though, I really wish there were more recruitable characters to find out in Grand Chien, similar to Jagged Alliance 2. In that game, I had several memorable characters who proved to be really good additions to the team. Shout out to my man Mad Dog. For the story itself, I was able to enjoy it the whole way through, although it lacks a lot of the visual storytelling that the second game had. Still, I enjoyed my time with this, as well as some of the twists and turns that you were able to participate in. In my opinion, I don't believe Grand Chien compares to Arulco, but what is here is more than adequate. And now for what I view as the game's only major flaw. While I do believe Jagged Alliance 3 is amazing for a majority of the playthrough, this game also has one of the most unsatisfying difficulty spikes I have ever seen. I won't get too in depth, but let's just say that one innocent meeting ended up spawning several death squads of highly professional soldiers all over the map. The first time this has happened, I had to reload a prior save as there was no way I was prepared for this. Second time through, I had about 3 full squads and prepared for the inevitable. I get that this game is ultimately an old school throwback to Jagged Alliance 2, but this archaic design feels more in the realm of the first game than anything else. I will admit as a fan of the second game that the amount of BS of that game is a far higher quantity, but this is still something that soured my experience. I get wanting to surprise players and keep them on their toes, but there are far better ways of going about it. If you've played this game for the first time with Iron Man mode, this is most likely where your playthrough will end. For all the issues I mentioned so far, this game is very mod friendly with a fairly active modding community currently. There's a mod that adds a % hit chance to get a more accurate view on your chances when firing a shot. If you want to get even more experimental, there are mods that add mercenaries from prior games and even some characters from other games and properties as well. Since Jagged Alliance 3 has only been out for about a year, I'm confident that the amount of mods available will only continue to grow. There's also just a ton of content in general. In my first playthrough, I clocked in about 62 hours. According to howlongtobeat.com, just focusing on the main story will net you about 48 hours. This is definitely a long game that is also highly replayable as well. And now for the last thing I wanted to talk about before wrapping this up, and that is the multiplayer. This game also features co-op, which while I have not had the chance to do so, a co-op campaign is something I plan to do in the future. I even got a couple of mercs that I plan to start with for that run, so I'm very curious how that'll turn out. From what I've heard, there doesn't seem to be many issues regarding connections or dropping out, which is a very good thing. Overall, I can definitely recommend Jagged Alliance 3 for veterans of the series and for turn-based tactics aficionados. The combat is great, the mercenaries are incredibly memorable, and there's a ton of content and replay value. My only real negative is the difficulty spike I mentioned prior, but other than that, this game is a well-made title that carries on the legacy of Jagged Alliance proudly. Would love to see links to get the old new Code of Pain treatment here, but maybe that's for Jagged Alliance 4. Only time will tell if that's actually going to happen. Thank you all for watching as always, and this is Powerhouse, signing off.